Continue in just a moment here on News Talk 1480 WHBC. A week ago at 10:08 p.m., police were called in London to reports of a vehicle driving on London Bridge, pulled up into the sidewalk area and started hitting pedestrians. Terrorists then got out of the car, ran over to the Borough Market pub, and started stabbing people with long knives. 4 people were killed, 48 were injured. Another terrorist attack in London, which is 3, by the way, this year in England. We saw it. We've seen it in Germany. We've seen it in France. We've seen it all over. And the question is, how is it going to get handled? And Dr. Jasser is an MD. He is an internal medicine doctor, but he also, after the 9/11 attacks, he became president of the American Islamic Forum for Democracy. He is also the author of a book, A Battle for the Soul of Islam, an American Muslim patriot's fight to save his faith. Dr. Jasser you've seen him on every major network. He has worked as a commissioner and vice chair in the United States Congress on the United States Commission on Internal Religious Freedom. He is an authority on the Muslim religion, a devout Muslim on his own. The organization was designed to try and depoliticize the Muslim religion. And I wonder, that almost seems like a dichotomy to me. It almost seems like it's a term that doesn't fit. How do you depoliticize Islam when you have Sharia law? And those are some of the questions I want to ask Dr. Jasser, but he will be on with us live at 10 o'clock. He is attending a medical conference in Chicago, but has offered to be on the show with us while he is at the conference. And, I want to get into why we're seeing these attacks, why we're continuing to see these attacks. I want to get his opinion on the travel ban. I want to get his opinion on where his organization is going, and does he ever feel like this isn't working? Is radical Islamic terrorism increasing rather than diminishing? So we're going to do all that. When we come back at 10 o'clock, we're going to talk live with Dr. Jasser about the terrorist attacks and about all the things we just discussed. Stay tuned. The Week That Was will continue after the news and sports. Our number 3 of the Week That Was, and I talked earlier about the terrorist attack last week, a week ago today. It started about 10 p.m. in London on London Bridge. 3 men in a van driving over pedestrians, getting out of the van, and then running over to the market area and stabbing pedestrians. This continues to go on throughout Europe. 52% of Americans say that they approve the travel ban, the anti-terrorist travel ban, and they see it as a anti-terrorist ban and not an anti-Muslim ban. 52% according to Rasmussen. But I am very fortunate. We are all very fortunate right now to have with us a gentleman who is a doctor, a medical doctor, an internal medicine physician, but he's also the founder and president of the American Islamic Forum for Democracy, AIFD, and is the author of a great book, A Battle for the Soul of Islam, an American Muslim patriot's fight to save his faith. And Dr. Jasser, thank you so much. Dr. Jasser. Dr. Jasser, thanks for being with me this morning.
Oh, it's great to be with you. Thanks for, it's good to be back.
Well,
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I appreciate it very much. I know you're busy. I know you're involved in a conference up in Chicago, so I can't thank you enough for taking time to be with me.
Anytime.
Dr. Jasser, when you look at your organization, and this is the first question that comes to my mind, is your goal of AIFD is to actively confront the ideology of political Islam and openly counter the common belief that the Muslim faith is rooted to the concept of the Islamic State. How that doesn't seem possible to me as not a Muslim, that you could separate the political, the Sharia law part, all that, with the Muslim faith. Explain how that can happen.
Well, first of all, I think it's very important that people realize how important that is to do, because, terrorists terrorism is a symptom, violence is a symptom, and our Homeland Security has been focused simply on that endpoint. And it's sort of like trying to fight all of the deaths related to drunk driving without addressing alcoholism. And what is the substance? Now, the question is, like you said, can you separate Islam from the faith, from the theopolitical supremacist movement of Islamism? And I know there are differences between faiths, but the bottom line is the Christian world took an enlightenment, took a reformation, took multiple revolutions until it actually understood what it meant to render unto Caesar what is Caesar and unto God's what is God's. And we're blessed to have this nation, America, that had a constitution in 1789 that finally rendered canonic law just the realm of the church and prevented the establishment of the church. So yes, Islam is different in many ways, but I think it also is going through that period. It's only 1,438 years old. It is going through a time in which there are going to be many wars within Islam, and I think that's what we need to understand. This is not the Islamists that want to create all these Islamic states across the world want this to be a war about Islam versus Christianity or Islam versus the West. But the way we need to look at it is, the way our American Islamic Forum looks at it is, this is a war within Islam between the Islamists and the rest of us that reject the establishment of religion. It will take generations to reform Sharia. All of the Sharia that is in textbooks today is still in the 13th century, but we have a problem with the establishment. The establishment of our community, the leadership, are all petro-Islamic byproducts from regimes like Saudi Arabia, Iran, and Egypt's Al-Azhar University. These are not byproducts of free thinkers. They're coming out of regimes that controlled thought and prevented critical thinking. There's been very little critical thinking in the Islamic world, even since the 14th, 15th century. So as a result, our organization feels that America needs to start taking sides within the House of Islam with reformers, and that's what our Muslim reform movement is all about.
When you look at that, Dr. Jasser, and you mentioned, Saudi Arabia and Iran and different places, these are theocracies, and is there a belief that the people, the royal family, say in Saudi Arabia, doesn't want critical thinking among its citizens? Because if there's critical thinking, they don't hold on to power. And so they suppress the critical thinking in those places. Is that part of the problem?
Exactly. What everybody needs to understand is that the old Arab tyrant manual cycle is to allow the festering of political Islamic movements, supremacist movements in a viral way, so that the corporate Islamists who believe the same thing, the Saudi royal family has beheaded more people through their judges than ISIS did in the last year. Their judges believe the same types of laws as ISIS, but they just do it with ties or robes and beards in a more organized fashion, but they chop the heads off of Muslims in front of the mosque in Jeddah publicly. They cut the hands of those who steal. Women are abused. Rape victims are called the criminals because they're alone with men in Saudi Arabia. All these horrific types of laws are part of the Saudi system that's exported. This little tribe that would be nothing had it not been for billions of dollars of petrol has created one form of Islam globally that has just saturated the market of ideas because of the oil. So when you look at El-Sisi, he is supposedly talking reform at the belly of the beast, and Al-Azhar University in Cairo, he told them, you need to reinterpret these passages that talk about violence and destruction, etc. Well, he was lauded as being brave, and I have to say, I said at that time, and now I'm being proved correct, he never used words like freedom or liberty. He never talked about free speech, all the principles that would be necessary for Muslims to truly question that authority. He has tortured and jailed journalists. He has a system there that intentionally creates a cycle, which was true for Nasser, Mubarak, and Sadat. So all of these dictators have a culture and a society that is a prison and unable. And that's why it's so important that we do this work in America. And we need to start working with reformist organizations here, because we can start to create the backdrop of an identity for Muslims that's rooted in being American and being free, rather than rooted in being an Islamist and having an Islamic State identity.
And I see a contradiction to a certain extent, Dr. Jasser, is the fact that you're working, and Muslims like you are working to reform this, and at the same time, the United States government is propping these regimes up and giving them the power to continue to do what they do.
Because we don't have a long-term strategy. We look at every problem. It's like if you're a physician treating disease, you wait for the cancers to come and you keep cutting out the tumors, and you just depend on the surgeons. Forget the smoking cessation, forget the good health, exercise, chemo, all the other treatment. No, just wait and cut out the tumors. And that's what our entire Homeland Security, domestically and globally, has been a countering violent extremism strategy, where these regimes, Al-Qaeda comes up, we say we're going to decimate it. In 2008, we had basically defeated Al-Qaeda. Now the Arab awakening happens, where we can put these dictators on notice, and all of a sudden ISIS comes in to fill that vacuum, and we go meet in Saudi Arabia, and we say, oh, the solution will be to end ISIS, and we'll get back to 20th century norms, which is absurd. We have to start to look beyond that, and this is the key. We can't just be against terrorism. We have to be for something. What are the ideas that we're advancing? What are the platforms that we help? If we're not for anything, those vacuums are going to keep recurring and be filled with tyranny.
Wow. And that is... I hadn't thought of that. That's a great point. Is part of the problem that we're not demanding that the countries in Europe who bring immigrants in, who bring refugees in, even here in the United States, is part of the problem that we are not demanding assimilation to our countries, or is that overblown in your mind?
No, it's not overblown. I mean, this is why also I think America has a far better opportunity to confront. Not only are we rooted in the first freedom being religious freedom, and we, our founding fathers know how to fight theocracy, and that's what you and I are talking about, is fighting theocracy. Europe, I think, has a tougher time in what does it mean to be German? What does it mean to be French? They're immigrants. If you look, the Brits now, what people are ignoring, do you know that not only were there about 600-700 Brits that are serving in the jihad in Syria as jihadists, how many Brit Muslims are serving in their own military? It's about 500 to 700. So when you have a 50-50, that should be 99% in the British military versus 1% jihad. It's almost the same numbers. That means it's not only are they going down into radicalization, you're not teaching your immigrants to want to serve, to defend and die for your own country. That is the problem, because it's not only assimilation, it is a tough love in which people that come in become part of your society first, Brits first, Americans first, and everything else second. And what's happening is they're getting sucked into identity movements, separatist insurgencies, and what these Islamists are insurgencies within their countries, because Islamism, in the nonviolent way, is a political movement that wants to evangelize its ideas into mosques, into societies, to put the West on defense, and ultimately to weaken secular societies that they see as their primary enemy in the world.
Do you believe in the? Do you agree with with President Trump's travel ban?
I have supported the fact that we need to, because the last 8 years, not even more than 8 years, the Bush administration also, we have not had a policy that identifies Islamism and Islamists as a threat that should not be coming into this country. So far, the vetting for people coming in has been based on do they belong to terror groups, do they espouse violence, etc. And ultimately, you're just looking at their behavior rather than their ideas. And surprise, surprise, we've been threatened, and it hasn't been working. So just like in the Cold War, we didn't only look for people who were part of the Soviet apparatus. We looked for communists. Any communist would be ultimately people who did not share our values and should not be allowed in. So I think it's important to have a 90, 120-day ban, which is a pause, not about religion, but about those countries that, by the way, those 6 countries are almost chaotic regimes that we have no ability to work with their governments. Mm-hmm. They're all basically enemies or disorganized countries. So the background checks and all of that have been useless. Even the Obama administration, that list came from them. So if it becomes an indefinite ban, I would be against that because it's un-American. It prevents us from bringing in folks that would actually be very important to helping us fight this battle, who are refugees politically, et cetera. And, my family were refugees, so I don't want it to be misinterpreted that I would be against immigration.
Yeah.
I do think it's very bizarre that the court is disregarding what's actually on the executive order, but actually holding the president accountable to stump speeches and comments.
Yes.
I was very critical of President Trump and the verbiage he used in the campaign, unable to discern the difference between Muslim and Islamists, Islam and Islamism. But now he's the president, and we have to hold him accountable to what he's saying now, not prevent him from doing things that are important to keeping us safe because of commentary from the stumps in the campaign.
Yes, and we are talking with Dr. Zuhdi Jasser. He is a internal medicine physician, but also, more importantly, to I think the world right now, and you may not think so. I mean, there's obviously importance to both, but he is a founder and president of the American Islamic Forum for Democracy, the AIFD, and he's author of a great book. You got to read this book, A Battle for the Soul of Islam and American Muslim Patriots Fight to Save His Faith. Dr. Jasser, I have one more question for you. I know you got to go, but do you feel like you're winning this battle? Do you feel like it's getting there, or do you feel like it's almost like, it just keeps getting worse?
Personally, I'm a positive person, cup half full. If you look at where we were, we formed our organization in 2003, and now we've got 15 organizations that formed our Muslim Reform Movement in Canada, Europe, the U.S., leaders of small organizations that are startup reformists that are trying to advocate for. Look up our declaration. It's a 2-page declaration that we believe should be used by our government, should be used by anyone trying to vet Muslims, organizations that you decide you want to work with, versus figuring out who are the Islamists that we should work against. So I think we're making progress. Now, nationally, our government, the West, we're making no progress. We went backwards the last 8 years. We don't have a strategy. We need a sort of a Manhattan Project to put together a group to look at the strategy against the global jihad. So I hope Americans realize that if you say that this is just a Muslim problem and we'll let them figure it out, Muslims are not going to figure this out on our own. We can have the tools and the solutions. We have to lead this. But unless the West starts getting into the game where you start developing, like we did in the Cold War, we had Radio Free Europe and tons of apparatuses of advancing the ideas of freedom into those societies that were being influenced by Soviet propaganda. Unless we start countering the Al Jazeeras, the Al Arabiyas of the world, all the petro-Islamic billions of dollars of propaganda used to indoctrinate Muslims here in the West, unless we start to put resources into that, you're going to continue to have your largest agency in government, Homeland Security and State Department and the Pentagon, continue an unbelievably expensive whack-a-mole program. And, that's why we need to start. We have not made any progress with the government, with universities, because of political correctness. We need to start demanding that we have open debates about, is Islam reconcilable with modernity? Who are the Muslims that are going to lead reform? What does reform look like? And by the way, if anyone thinks that this is not the business of government because it's a religious problem, that's how America was founded. Nobody's saying that American government needs to get into Sharia. We can get into advancing liberty and defeating theocracy. That's what we're all about. So it can be done. We just have been completely anesthetized.
How can people go your website, Dr. Jasser, for people to go to?
Our website is aifdemocracy.org, AIF as in forum, democracy.org, and I have a new newsletter coming out at takebackislam.com, takebackislam.com.
And again, he's the author of a book that you got to read, A Battle for the Soul of Islam, an American Muslim Patriot's Fight to Save His Faith. Dr. Jasser, again, thank you so much for your time. I could spend hours and hours talking with you about this, but I know we've got a crunch and you've got things to do. So I hope to talk to you again, and I thank you.
Anytime. Thanks for having me back.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Dr. Jasser, Dr. Zuhdi Jasser, incredible man, trying to fight for the soul of Islam against tremendous odds. Stay tuned. The week that was will continue. I want